Hi, I'm Jeff Barkman and I talk about things. Thank you so much for coming to my YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit share and share this video on your social media platforms, wherever you're playing. Go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Today I'm talking about inheritance versus contending. One of my viewers actually requested that I talk about this because it was a completely new concept to them, and I think that maybe it's a new concept to a lot of people out there. We grow up thinking, you know, we hear about the parable where Jesus talks about the old lady that won't leave an unrighteous judge alone, and so she gets her justice in the end, and we draw the conclusion that that means we just need to keep on praying for the same thing over and over and over, and then eventually God will give it to us. The issue with interpreting that parable in that way is that God is not an unrighteous judge. He's for us, and he wants to give us good things. In the book of James, it talks about the Father of lights being the source of everything that's good in our lives. So it doesn't really make sense. So the concept of inheritance versus contending is the reason why connection to the voice of God is paramount in our lives. We can't live without connection to the voice of God. We can't live life abundantly without connection to the voice of God. If you want to know what life looks like without connection to the voice of God, you can just look around and you can tell who is really sad. They're not connected to the voice of God. I promise you that. So with inheritance and contending, it's important to mention that some things can only be obtained through contending, like praying for the same thing over and over. The thing is attaching your faith to prayer is one thing, and kind of like bugging the Lord for something. I don't think that's super valuable, to be totally honest. And the reason is because faith without works is dead. When you attach your faith to prayer, it's powerful. It causes life. It causes change. Most of the time, the change that it causes is going to be something that you need to do. So I'm all for contending, but I think that contending has to include action. Contending has to include something on my part. And I'm going to get into more practically what that means later when I tell a story about my first year of ministry school. Another thing that's really important to mention is that some things can only be obtained through inheritance, identity. And that would look like, possibly from the outside, sometimes it might look like inaction. It might look like doing something, like not doing something when the wisdom of the world would say you need to do something about this, right? So resting in inheritance. Some things in the spirit realm, some things in God can only be obtained through inheritance. And the reason I'm making this video is because trying to contend for things that can only be gotten through inheritance, or trying to rest in your identity for things that can only be gotten through contending, it doesn't work. And so a lot of people are wondering why they're praying to a brass heaven and they're not getting the results that they want. They're not getting the breakthrough that they want. And I would suggest to you that a big reason might be, one, we're contending improperly. We're just praying and expecting the Lord to manifest something in our lives, and we don't want to actually take part in the manifestation of God's purposes in our lives. Two, we're contending for something that can only be obtained through inheritance. Three, we're waiting and resting and doing nothing out of our identity, resting on our identity for something that needs to be contended for. So I think that it's really important to be connected to the voice of God to be able to know, is it time to contend, or is it time to rest? Is it time to wait? What needs to happen for this breakthrough to take place? Trying to contend for things that require inheritance and identity, that's striving. Trying to rest in your identity to get things that are actually to be obtained through contending, that's entitlement. And so these two things, striving and entitlement, they're actually counterfeits of inheritance and contending. If you think about like a bus, if you've ever ridden the bus, even if you haven't ridden the bus, I'm sure you've seen in movies people running to catch the bus. Here's the thing. Buses typically show up at the same time every day. So it's super easy to be on time for the bus. But some days, back in the day when I was riding the bus to work, there were certain days where I had to run to catch the bus. Now, here's my question. How do you know whether you need to run or not? And the answer is you see the bus. If the bus is starting to pull away, or if the bus has been at the stop and you're kind of too far away, I mean, you know whether you need to run to see the bus. You know whether you need to run to catch the bus based on what you see. And it's the same with entitlement. Sorry, not entitlement. It's the same with inheritance and contending. You know whether it's time to rest in your identity or to contend in prayer based on connection to the voice of God. Connection to the voice of God is going to always tell you what needs to happen, because he's for you and his purposes are for you, and he has a plan to accomplish his purposes in your life, and he always will tell you how to do it, how to move forward. So my story, to articulate this whole point in a little bit of a different way, when I went to the first year of ministry school, the Lord called me to go there with no money. Horrifying for me at the time. And still, when I think back, it's pretty scary still. And there were times where I needed rent money to come in, or I needed money for tuition for school, or I needed money for whatever. And the reason other students honestly watched my journey and they couldn't figure out why all these financial miracles were happening in my life. And the reason is because I didn't use my mind to figure out what I needed to do. Because I'd done that for my whole life, and it wasn't the journey that the Lord was taking me on. He was inviting me to lay my mind down and to trust him and to let him build authentic trust within me. And so I was actually in a state of life or death, needing connection to the voice of God to be able to survive. And so what was interesting was that it wasn't always the same thing that I needed to do to have the breakthrough manifest in my life. There were some times where I needed rent, and I asked the Lord what I needed to do, and he would tell me, do nothing. And honestly, my inclination would have been to, post on social media, tell people, oh my gosh, I need money. I don't have rent money, and rent's due in 3 days. But Holy Spirit told me not to do anything at all. And the money would show up. I wouldn't do anything, and somebody would get in touch with me and say, hey, I had a dream. The Lord told me to send you this exact amount of money. And it was the exact amount of money as my rent. But then I had other times where I could feel lack was threatening me. Lack is the belief that you won't have enough later, which is counter to who God is when he says that he's our provider. But I'd have these times where I would have this thing with lack, and I would give it up to the Lord and process with God and pray about it and get some comfort. But there would come a prophetic act that I needed to actually partner with generosity, or I needed to partner with abundance to actually break that agreement with lack. And I remember one time specifically, really I needed rent, I needed tuition, I needed everything. And I was doing declarations in the morning, my Father is his good pleasure to provide for all my needs, and he loves to provide for my desires as well. But this one day, I just couldn't shake this feeling of lack, this fear that I wouldn't have enough in the future. And I said, Holy Spirit, what do I need to do to break agreement with lack today? And he said, take your housemate with the last of your money, take your housemate to that really expensive coffee place and have a really nice breakfast with him. And so I did. I had $30 to my name, and I took my buddy Jesse to this place in Reading. And I spent I don't know, it was $35. It was literally to tip 20% was the end of my money. And I did. And when I did it, what it did was it aligned my heart with abundance, and I got this breakthrough. And it was did the number in my bank account change? It didn't change in that moment. The money that I needed did come through, not at that exact time. There was still some time period that was uncomfortable, but I knew that the two things were connected, that my prophetic declaration to the spirit realm, when I went and partnered with abundance and bought Jesse breakfast, it actually aligned me spiritually with the nature of abundance. And what happened was then abundance was attracted to my life. If I had partnered with lack would have been attracted to my life. But because I partnered with abundance was attracted to my life, and the financial miracles came in. So thank you so much for watching these videos. I really appreciate you being on my channel. If you want to go ahead and like this video right now, I would really love that. And if you want to share this video on your social media platforms, I will be forever grateful. Bless you.